Good morning, everybody. My name is Charlie Fink. I'm here with my partner in crime, Ted Schilowitz. It's This Week in XR. Today is June 4th, 2021. How are we doing today, Ted?
Good morning, Charlie. It's a nice, the beginning of summer morning here in Los Angeles. And as always, there's lots of interesting things floating around in our XR universe.
Beginning of summer, meaning it is going to be hot AF today.
Hot and dry and probably fiery, which is a little dangerous.
Kindly, not good news that we're in a drought and now summer is starting when things really get super dried out. But as you say, lots of interesting action. This week, we've got a lot of enterprise XR announcements, which is kind of interesting because I don't think we've been talking about enterprise much recently, but of course it's the biggest category of XR. That's where XR is really making money. And when you look at the charts created by analysts like AR Insider, you see that it dwarfs where consumer is right now. I mean, obviously over time, those colored graphs change, but that's where we are today. Really interesting use cases also show us some things where consumer might go. So for example, Liberstream, which is a company that's raised a heck of a lot of money, 55 million, just announced that they had integrated AI into their natural language processing into their AR platform for remote assistance. And they integrate with the HoloLens and the Vuzix, and they get their software out there in about 80 countries, and they've been doing it for about 20 years. So it's sort of invisible to most consumers and probably to a lot of our listeners, but what they've achieved is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, and I think for our listeners that are, a lot of them are pursuing careers in a part of that XR sphere, a lot of them will end up going to companies like that are actually already thriving and have large employee counts, large contracts, large work streams that are important to the ecosystem. And it's just, companies are finding use cases for this, what we call dynamic screen media, right? Not just traditional screen media, where workers need to be mobile and moving around and accomplishing tasks. And it's just better than holding a tablet or a smartphone all day long. So there's a lot of adoption in that, and there's a lot of growth in that.
And speaking of that, Specular Theory, a VR production company, just landed a $4.5 million contract with the Air Force to create simulators for aerial refueling.
Right.
So my first reaction to that, of course, was, you mean you don't have that?
Yeah, how come that, isn't that already a thing? Isn't that super dangerous and hard to do? Haven't we figured out how to make sure this works correctly? But probably not. It's all probably pretty manual and pretty, someone in one plane with a joystick kind of going, I think I got it, kind of thing. So yeah, better tools to do that, certainly important.
So my friends at Avature, run by a guy named Devin Copley, these are the ex-Nokia Ozu guys. I don't know if you remember that really.
Yeah, I was actually involved in the Ozo quite heavily at that point in time. So yes.
But these guys left Nokia and did a startup, and I saw their platform about a year ago, and it has come a long way. I want to explain how it works. This is another great use case for XR. There is someone with a 360 camera on a GoPro wearing an audio headset, and that 360 video creates a room in VR. And inside of that room, you can attend using a PC or a VR headset. You can be virtually present with other people who are all remote. So imagine you're touring your new chip factory in Shenzhen and you can't travel to China, or there's COVID, or you want to save a lot of bucks. You can direct that 360 camera operator all through the facility. You can have, the builders, the engineers there, participating in the simulation. So, and I think they can have now up to 20 people. So that's a lot of people touring through. So you can imagine, for example, the boss went to China and he's there in the factory, but he wants all the people back in the office, all the different stakeholders, to be virtually present for the walkthrough.
Yeah.
So they raised 2.9 million. It sounds like it's worth a lot more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea of this is kind of this idea of co-location, right? The idea of using cameras and sensors and certainly now VR technology to be able to bring someone with someone else. It's actually not a whole lot different than if you were in an exotic location or I was, and we were doing a little video chat and I was like, hey, Charlie, you got to check it out. And I would put on my phone and hold it up and move it around and show you stuff. So it kind of comes from that consumer ethos of when you have a camera with you all the time, you have an eye to the world that other people can see remotely through a cloud infrastructure. And these guys are taking it to a professional level. Which is really interesting, because I do that all the time. Like I'm away from my wife. It's a crazy place in Asia, and I'm like, you have to see what I'm doing right now through my eyes. And it's basically, here's my smartphone as my eyes. If it was something even better than that, which is probably a little bit what Snap was working on with their spectacles. The idea of that you have this kind of instant on look through the world and then snap the picture and upload it. And now they're evolving into a full AR device, which is really important.
Well, of course, you'll get a much larger field of view through glasses than you ever will through a smartphone,
through a little phone,
or even a pad, which is, got the smallest field of view you could conceive of.
Right. So one camera versus a 360 thing where you can see everything, right?
Or even 40 degrees of your 360 image that I have to scan is going to be way better than my own smartphone. So last example, Walmart has a technology division, and they are leaning into AR.
Yeah.
And they announced recently that they had finally created a mobile application for wayfinding, picking, and work instructions. So you can send a text message to the back, because each of the stores has its own mini warehouse in the back of the house. So they've got somebody back there, he gets a message, listen, we need a box of jam. So can you pull it from inventory? And the guy flips up his screen and it shows, he inputs what they want, and it shows him how to get there, and he can find it on the shelf without even reading the box.
Right.
So what's interesting is they say it's typically a procedure that takes 2, sometimes 3 minutes, but now they can do it in 40 seconds.
Right.
So a minute and 20 seconds doesn't sound like a huge time savings, except when that procedure has to be done 10,000 times a day.
It adds up.
Thousands of warehouses around the world. So per day, they're actually saving almost 15,000 minutes.
Yeah, and that's huge dollars, right? And this is kind of this technological advancement war that all the giant, used to be physical, now mostly e-commerce, or started as e-commerce. So it's the war between Amazon and Walmart and Alibaba and anybody that has massive amounts of inventory. Because when you talk to really smart people about what those companies actually are, they are logistics companies. They are managing a logistics operation to move goods from point A to point B. And the better they get at it, the more efficient they get at it, the more profit they derive, right? To the point where what Amazon figured out to the everybody else is the wonder of how did they get so good at this, is they figured out that as they're creating a logistics company, cloud logistics is the biggest opportunity. And here comes AWS, and AWS powers the digital goods movement of many, many companies, which is just a logistics problem, right? So, and that's one of the most profitable companies in the world now. So there you go, right?
So let's get to our guests.
Yes.
This is going to be a really interesting conversation. They run a company called Adventurelab that did an amazing live VR performance / game / escape room / animated movie. So I'm excited to have them with us. Our guests today are Kim Adams and Max Planck, who founded and run together Adventurelab, which is an entertainment platform featuring live performers and original productions that accommodate up to 8 people. Thank you guys for joining the show. As I said when we were in the green room, I'm excited to introduce you because you have such an unusual and prestigious pedigree. I guess you guys both worked at Pixar and Oculus Story Studio.
That's right. Yeah, Max was at.
Tell us what you were doing there and how you met.
Max was at Pixar twice as long as I, so you can start off.
Yeah, I know, but I feel like you earned your stripes much faster than I. You were doing some hard work there. We actually, Kim and I knew of each other at Pixar, but we weren't working as closely. I was in the feature film work, so I was a technical director there. I worked on movies like Up, Cars, WALL-E, the Monsters University, Good Dinosaur, and Brave. And I was on the side building all of the tools and technology to bring some of the new ideas the directors were having to life. Meanwhile, Kim was building a completely new division, which I'll let her speak to, but she was doing amazing work expanding Pixar's worlds.
Yeah, so I worked with the Cars and the Toy Story characters there, creating, when I was there, I created 13 short films along with some really talented up and coming directors, and directed a couple of TV specials, and then took off to join Google Spotlight Stories, because I became really fascinated with, the idea that you could be inside of a story and that stories could branch and the running time was variable, and it just sort of blew my mind. I saw Glenn Keane's duet on that platform, and that was it for me. I was like, I'm in. I don't know what's happening here, but this is a crazy conversation between these brilliant engineers and these incredibly talented artists, and this ongoing conversation. I want to be like right in the middle of that dialogue. So did that, and then connected again with Max at Oculus Story Studio, and we did some great work there with Dear Angelica and Wolves in the Walls, and then went to Facebook and headed up something for Portal called Storytime, which was AR storytelling. And then Max and I started, meeting for lunch and going, okay, what should we do here?
Well, maybe we can start out our conversation with a description of what the Adventurelab experience was like. Ted has done it, and I've done it. We both participated in something called Dr. Crumb's School for Disobedient Pets.
That's right.
I got to be a husky. What were you, Ted?
What was I? I think I was a rabbit. I think I was a rabbit.
So there's a whole story at the beginning where we meet Deputy Dog, and he explains what our mission is, and we choose avatars, and we're transported as disobedient pets to this, I guess, pet boarding place that is actually a front for a computer character who wants to take over the world, but he needs minions.
Right.
I guess his former minions had failed, so we are in the minion audition / training academy.
Yep, that's it.
And together as a group of sort of, I don't know, Hanna-Barbera characters, we have to navigate a maze and some killer
solve
robots,
problems and figure things out.
Yeah. And each of us has some kind of a superpower. I think I had smell because I was a dog.
Yeah.
And it was quite a lot of fun.
Hearing, that's right.
Yeah, I had super hearing.
So Deputy Dog, the crazy Dr. Crumb, and yet another character who you meet inside of the maze are all played by the same actor.
Right.
And it was, at least when I did it, a bravura performance. I mean, they must have been exhausted afterwards. And the next thing I thought of is, well, what does the control panel look like, right? What is he seeing? Because they have to be not only in character, but also omniscient, setting the path, so to speak. And the second time I did it, I was with the partner of one of our producers who's a Unity nerd like I am, Kayvon. And so Kayvon is a gamer. So it made things much easier. The first time I did it, I was with people like me, and Dr. Crumb practically had to tell us how to get out of the maze so that they could finish the story in less than an hour. So it's never the same. It's never the same. It depends on who you're with and who the actor is on that day.
Yeah, and that's when, at the core of what we were doing and what we're excited about is we saw like there's this trend happening where people are hanging out in games. Games aren't just this thing you do for play. It's actually a space for creating new connections. And I was also, at the time we were talking about this, I was getting deeply into escape rooms. I was playing Dungeons and Dragons again. I was dungeon mastering with a group of friends. And I was getting into immersive theater. I was like, there's something here about when you show up, there's someone who's responsible for making sure you all have a good time. So what if that was a cool secret ingredient that made sure that connection could happen? And so you could see we were doing a lot of things with Dr. Crumb. It was a game, it was a performance, it was a role-playing thing. So it's a lot of things.
Although there are a lot of great escape rooms. I think the Paradiso in New York that combine live actors in them.
Yes.
You know, and so this is sort of a cousin of that by way of a Pixar film.
Yeah, and you saw how the advantage we have with the live performer in there, and can immediately tell how much experience do people have in VR and in games, so they can level it up, make it harder for
Yep.
you on the fly, or really help, you know, say, okay, do you know how to locomote? Let's do that first, but do it in a creative way.
Well, and I think what I've noticed, you just mentioned it, Max, is you've tapped two nerves. Well, you certainly tapped amazing nerves when you both were at Pixar, right? And that pedigree and that work product, that creative inspiration that you created, inspired a generation of storytellers in many ways. And you know, I think you have that same DNA that we all have about looking for interesting ways to tell stories with new technology. And what you just commented on, Max, is something that I've really sort of been working on more than anything these days, is this permanence of that digital landscape where people are entering into worlds and spending time in that world and then going find things to do in that world, as opposed to the traditional way that we look at content and sort of pick through little boxes of content until we find the one we want. Newer audiences are starting to understand this concept of the metaverse as something well beyond what I think its original thought process was, as it is literally a place where you live and then absorb content and choose to go to different places. So you're driving into that in a really powerful way, which I think is important.
And that's something we learned where we want to go next is with Adventurelab, you buy a ticket, you're sent instructions on how to download the app, and when you show up, that's when the performer brings the world to life. But outside of that, your time box, you can't really do much in the game. And we realized that what would be powerful here is, what if there was a space to hang out in?
Yeah.
We're excited about an idea we're hoping to get off the ground if we find the right partner, is a haunted house experience, where you can be in the woods and the cemetery and the mysterious swamp. You could hang out there, you can run into strangers, you can choose an avatar that grows with you, that gets accessories over time. But the honeypot, the thing that is the thing to do that's exciting, the quest, is this door that's closed, that to get access to it, you have to buy a ticket to a performance. And so in that way, there's a way to hang out before, afterwards, and talk about the experience that you can do with the performer.
Yeah, so you're basically creating a digital metaphor of a theme park environment, so that there are rides and attractions at the theme park, but a big part of the joy of going to the theme park is just going to the theme park with your family and, you know, grabbing a snack and wandering around and looking at the signage and deciding what to do next, and socializing, as you say, should we go left or should we go right? That is starting to happen in the digital realm, and we're starting to see massive success within gaming culture that way, but you're expanding it outside of gaming culture into more story-driven culture, which we think is good.
Right. When you get to open the doors for the haunted house, there's a live performer greeting you, right? That's going to be the creepy butler, and then potentially embody a number of different poltergeists and actively craft scares live as you're moving through the experience, changing it every time, such that when you open the one door, it opens to the kitchen one time and might open to the cellar the next time.
So I'm interested in the business model, right? The actor gets paid, you get paid. I mean, how much does a ticket cost? And how are you thinking this would develop as a business?
What we built is a platform. So not only are we building this content, but we've made a way for the performer to say, hey, these are the hours I like to work. They use our web app to do that. That's how shows pop up. When people buy a show, that part of that money goes to the performer, and part of it goes to us as the platform makers. And that's what we want to do, is make this so it's they can be their own business owners. They can truly operate essentially this escape room thing, but all we're using is cloud. It's all automated. And in that way, we think there's a big idea here, because we don't have the overhead of what a theme park does or an escape room does, where you actually have to have a staff and build out things. This people can do from anywhere in the world. All they need is a $300 VR headset, and they can have an audience that's anywhere in the world.
Right.
And so only a VR headset? Can anybody use different devices, mobile, PC?
We have an amazing prototype for that right now. So it does work, and it's pretty fascinating. I think Ted's done that experience where you can actually interact, the performers interacting with the players inside, as well as through their hardware devices with a camera, and that's, iPad, laptop, whatever, and it's pretty delightful. So
certainly we talked about your growth potential outside of what today's VR headset, which is a growing market, but still a fairly small market compared to people that have traditional visual compute devices, phones, laptops, desktops, tablets.
Right. I mean, I think
of,
we all think 5 years from now there's going to be a tremendous and receptive audience for this kind of live entertainment. But
yeah,
as Ted said, between here and there is a world of hybrid devices, and you're even going to have people in VR who might do it next time on a mobile phone.
correct.
that's right. Yeah. So we listened to a lot of audience feedback. Once we got through the initial months of selling out, we started to get people saying, like, I'm the only person I know with a headset. I want to be able to play with more friends. Is there a way to do that? So we dug in just to see, like, would it be fun? And turns out it really is.
So
Yeah.
who wrote this thing?
So Janine Willett and Kurt Fry. Both, Janine's a immersive theater expert, she co-founder of Third Rail Projects, and Kurt is a writer that writes for theme parks and interactive experiences.
And we know
I
that,
love this new.
we know that none of this.
I was going to say, I love this new genre that's emerging.
I was just going to say, we know that running a startup in the creative arts is no easy feat. And I think people would take a lot of inspiration from you that are learning to try and take a risk and put themselves out there and do something. And maybe it's worth you commenting on that from an inspiration standpoint, because this stuff is really hard to achieve, not just creatively, but economically and sustainability. And I think it's important for our listeners to hear why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and that it's okay to keep with this. Like, the struggle is worth it, right?
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. We've both learned so much over the last couple of years. And our mission that we started out with and that we still have today is to connect people across distance through play. The how we do it, we've pivoted a number of times. First, we were going to partner with LBEs, then the pandemic. So then we went fully in on home, and then also now multiple devices. So I think the ability to be flexible, like, are you staying true to your core mission? And if so, be willing to be flexible about the how, and the trajectory. Do you need to just stay low for a while as the market continues to grow and builds, quietly? And then there's that launch period where you're out there all the time. Max, what would you say in terms of takeaways?
It's definitely nerve-wracking. I know what sustains us is this. When Kim and I were talking, we were both at Facebook. I was working on the team that eventually was going to make Oculus Horizon, and Kim was working on Portal. And we were talking about what we wanted the metaverse to be. And I do worry about a future where people are hanging out in the metaverse all the time and not interacting in the real world. And also, people are hanging out there for 5 hours, and maybe of that 5 hours, they get 10 minutes of something that was really a great connection with someone else. And so for me, I was like, there needs to be some technology out there that creates incredible, nutritious value when people are spending time on the platform. And so this idea of, hey, you're going to spend an hour here, it's time boxed, and you're doing it with someone who is going to facilitate it so you guys are connecting in an amazing way. That's what fueled me. For us, it's now a matter of finding that right market that wants this. It's been a challenge to convince investors this is an interesting path. It's been a challenge to convince players this isn't a game you're paying for, it's a performance. We had a lot of gamers be like, I'm not going to spend that much money on a 1 hour experience. I'm used to spending $20 and getting 20 hours of content. And so I think the journey for us as a company is, we have this grand vision. We know it's going to be a big idea someday. We now need to meet the market where they are. What is the audience willing to spend? Where are they willing to hang out? And so I think one of the big lessons we learned is this theme park approach. I think people would be willing to buy a game, download it, and then buy these moments in it if they can hang out in it all the time and create community. Well, I think that's the next leap.
If I could give you a little bit of inspiration to keep going, if you think about who was the original creative pivoter, as the term has come much, much later in life, was Walt Disney, right? So Walt Disney continually moved his creative mechanism in various ways to find what audiences we would be intrigued with, to grow the company, to grow the creativity, to help his staff stay motivated and interested in what they were doing. And he really never stopped. And the DNA of that company never stops. And they created a division called Imagineering that was effectively what you are doing, which is a lot of times they go into hiding for a while, they work on stuff, they pop out, their heads pop out from the gopher hole. They say, okay, let's put that over there and see what happens. So what you're doing is in that legacy. And I think it's important for people to know that it's okay to keep trying to find the right chemistry until it really works. I think it's a really valuable thing.
I would also say, just a last bit, especially to your audience who's thinking about this space, is I am very, very excited about where VR is. I think it's been a challenge that we've been doing this since 2019. I saw the Quest at Facebook. I knew the standalone headset was going to be transformative. And it has taken a little longer than I was hoping for the market to realize this. But with the Quest 2 out there and the new devices coming out, there's a huge moment here where the market is growing. I think investment is still waiting to see that market blow up. So we're kind of lagging that a bit. But I do think right now is an incredible time to be experimenting and being creative in the space, because there is going to be a huge lucrative moment within the next year.
Yeah, and the hits are out there. They are already out there. People are making a living, and some are succeeding well, and that's going to continue to grow. And there'll be more hits as the audience gets bigger and we try more interesting things. So you guys are absolutely at the tip of the spear. So I would say just keep at it.
One thing that I was going to bring up, well, two things really. One is I just love the idea that we're democratizing the art of live performance, largely left the mainstream with the exception of Broadway. The other thing that I love about this, and you brought up Walt Disney, which is very apropos, which is he realized that people wanted to be inside the world of the movies, but they could only achieve that using props and stagecraft and dark rides. But now, of course, we have the technology like Disney to put live actors and to put people in another world and make them the heroes of the story, as you guys did with Dr. Crumb. So it's super valid, super exciting. Can our listeners do this? What's the story there these days?
We had our 1-year anniversary of Dr. Crumb. We ran consistent shows for an entire year. We took 1,000 people through the experience across the world during a global pandemic when they couldn't be together otherwise. So we had a big celebration of that. And then we're going back under the hood now to work on that experience such that the hosts can truly run it themselves, so that we can have exponential performers, exponential showtimes, and it runs much, much easier. The performers are their own tech support. So making things easy and intuitive enough for all parties that can happen.
Well, Kim and Max, we're out of time, but it was so great to see you guys again and delve a little bit deeper into the Adventurelab stories. We're looking forward to your haunted house and your relaunch. And I hope you guys have a great weekend. And thanks again for your time.
Really great talking to you guys. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk to you.
Thank you.
That's our show for this week. It's Friday, June 4th, 2021. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.